The Widow's Hidden Canvas. Savannah, Georgia, 5 years after the funeral. The Spanish moss hung like funeral lace from the live oaks lining Monterey Square, swaying in the humid breath of a late May morning. Margaret Hargrove sat on the wrought iron bench outside her townhouse on East Jones Street, watching dust motes dance in the slanted light that slipped between the shutters. The house had belonged to her husband, Ellis Hargrove, America's painter of the Lowcountry. They'd called him on the glossy PBS special that still aired every pledge drive. 5 years since the aneurysm took him mid-stroke, brush in hand, canvas half-finished on the easel. 5 years since the world decided Margaret's only remaining purpose was to keep the shrine dusted. Inside, every wall was a gallery. Ellis's oils, salt marshes at dawn, shrimp boats under bruised skies, children chasing fireflies, hung in perfect museum rows. The studio upstairs hadn't been touched. The turpentine still smelled fresh enough to sting. Margaret had become the curator of a life that no longer included her own. She was 72, silver-haired, soft-spoken, the kind of widow neighbors brought casseroles to and then forgot. Her hands, once steady enough to detect a forged brushstroke from across the room, now trembled only when she poured sweet tea. She told herself it was arthritis. She told herself a lot of things. The anniversary always began the same. A knock at 10:17 a.m. Ellis's lucky number, her son Caleb joked. Caleb, 41, leaned from too many protein shakes, smelling of new money and old guilt. Beside him, his wife Lauren, all highlighted hair and calculated sympathy. "Morning, Mama." Caleb's hug was quick, cologne sharp. "We brought beignets from back in the day." Lauren's nod was a performance. "Thought we'd visit Daddy together." Margaret's heart, traitorous thing, lifted. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe the boy who once painted beside his father on the Battery would resurface. They left at noon. Caleb's black SUV gleamed under the magnolia. Margaret watched from the porch until the taillights disappeared toward Bonaventure Cemetery. Then she did something she'd never done. She followed. She took the old Volvo, windows down, azaleas blurring kink. The cemetery road wound through resurrection ferns and marble angels. She parked 2 rows back, slipped on Ellis's faded Braves cap, and walked the gravel path with a bouquet of supermarket roses, red, like the ones Caleb used to pick from her garden when he was 8. The Hargrove plot sat beneath a cedar, the family mausoleum a miniature Greek temple Ellis had designed himself. Margaret was 20 yards away when a voice rasped behind her. "Don't go over there just yet, Mrs. H." She turned. Old Mr. Jenkins, the groundskeeper, leaned on his rake. His overalls were the color of river clay, eyes sharp under the bill of his cap. "Jenkins? What?" He glanced toward the mausoleum. "Your boy's already inside, with company. You need to see it quiet-like." He led her off the path, through a tunnel of yacht pond holly to a knoll where the Hargrove crypt was visible through a lace of vines. Jenkins melted back into the trees. Margaret crouched, knees protesting, roses forgotten in her fist. The crypt door, bronze, verdigris, stood ajar. Caleb emerged first, rolling a canvas tube the length of a poster. Lauren followed with another. A third figure waited in the shadows, a man in a linen suit, Panama hat tilted low. He took the tubes, slid them into a leather portfolio, handed Caleb an envelope thick as a sandwich. Margaret's breath caught. The envelope disappeared into Caleb's back pocket. Lauren checked her phone, typed something, smiled like a woman who just closed escrow. They spoke too softly for words, but the gestures were a language Margaret knew. The quick scan for witnesses, the practiced nonchalance. Caleb locked the crypt, The stranger tipped his hat and vanished toward the service road. Caleb and Lauren walked the opposite way, arm in arm, laughing about something that made Lauren toss her hair. Margaret stayed until the gravel stopped crunching. Then she stood, roses crushed in her grip, and felt the years fall away like molting skin. She knew what she'd seen. She'd spent 30 years at the Telfair Museum authenticating Lowcountry art before Ellis's rising star eclipsed her own. She could spot a forged Hargrove from the impasto, alone, too even, too deliberate. Ellis painted like the marsh itself, wild, unpredictable, alive. Those canvases weren't wild, they were merchandise. That night, the house on Jones Street felt too large. She climbed the stairs to the studio. Moonlight striped the floorboards. Ellis's last painting, an unfinished salt marsh at twilight, leaned against the wall, the sky still wet in her memory. She opened the supply cabinet. Beneath drop cloths and cracked pallets lay her old kit, a wooden box the size of a violin case. Inside, nestled in velvet, a 10x loop, a handheld UV lamp, spectral pigment charts, and a digital microscope she'd bought the year Caleb started middle school and never used. She carried the box downstairs, set it on the dining table that hadn't seen a meal since the funeral. Roses from the cemetery wilted in a mason jar. She brewed coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe and began. First, she needed proof. Not suspicion. Proof. She called the only person who owed her a favor big enough to cash in after 30 years. Charleston Gallery, a bright voice answered. Put me through to Delilah Rue. A pause. Miss Rue is with a client. Tell her Margaret Hargrove needs 5 minutes. She'll take it. Delilah came on the line breathless. Maggie? Lord, I thought you'd gone to glory with Ellis. Still chicking. I need a meeting with your conservation team. Tomorrow. About? Bring your checkbook and your skepticism. I've got something that'll make your auction catalog sing. Or burn. The Charleston Gallery occupied a converted cotton warehouse on East Bay. Exposed brick, track lighting, the faint scent of linseed oil. Delilah, 50, sharp as a palette knife, met Margaret in the loading dock, away from prying eyes. Margaret unrolled a small canvas on the work table. A Lowcountry sunset, signature bold in the corner. E. Hargrove. She'd lifted it from the studio's discard pile years ago, a study Ellis abandoned for being too pretty. Authentic? Delilah asked. Completely. Now watch. Margaret switched on the UV lamp. The old linseed oil glowed warm amber. She produced a second canvas. Identical size, same scene, but the colors were richer, the clouds more dramatic. She'd intercepted it from a suspicious listing on an online auction site, shipped overnight. Under UV, the new canvas fluoresced cold blue in the highlights. Titanium white. Patented 1916. Ellis died in 2018. He never used it. Delilah's inhale was sharp. Who's painting these? My son. Silence stretched like turpentine fumes. Margaret laid out the rest. The cemetery exchange. The stranger. The envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The evidence was pigment and light. Delilah tapped the forged canvas. We were offered a collection of 10 rediscovered Hargroves next month. Private seller, starting bid $2 million. Cancel it. Can't. Contract signed, but, Delilah's eyes gleamed, we can expose it. Publicly. With you at the helm. Margaret felt the old fire kindle. I want a lab, full access, and a title. Senior authenticity consultant. Salary starts at 6 figures. You'll need a bigger house. I've got one. It's just full of ghosts. The next week,
Caleb and Lauren arrived unannounced, faces tight with the strain of people who'd bet the farm on a single hand. "Mama, we need to talk." Caleb paced the parlor, avoiding the walls of his father's paintings. Lauren's smile was brittle. "We just need a bridge loan. Sell one of Daddy's smaller pieces, the marsh study in the hall." "It's not for sale." Margaret's voice was calm, the calm of a woman who'd spent nights cataloging brushstrokes instead of sleeping. Caleb's laugh was ugly. "Everything's for sale. You taught me that when you quit the museum to play housewife." Margaret stood. "Follow me." She led them upstairs to the studio. The air was thick with memory and turpentine. On the easel sat the forged sunset, UV lamp glowing like a crime scene.